My husband Alex told me his Aunt Jessica had a medical emergency and he needed to rush to Portland immediately for the family crisis. Then I discovered through Instagram that he was actually at his sister Chloe's $200,000 luxury wedding at the exclusive mountain resort I'd helped them research months earlier. I wasn't invited to the family celebration I'd unknowingly helped plan, so I booked myself a spa weekend at the same luxury venue. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're a subscriber, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Tell us a duh. What happened when the Ellis family saw my posts from their private wedding location changed everything. Alex Harlan had been my husband for 6 years, and I thought I knew every detail of his relationship with his family. We lived in a beautiful craftsman house in Seattle that I'd decorated room by room, turning it into the home I believed we'd grow old in together. I'd spent years learning the intricate social dynamics of the Ellis family, mastering their formal communication style, their scheduled affection, and their unwritten rules about everything from gift-giving to dinner conversation. But that Thursday morning in November, everything I believed about my place in his family crumbled in the span of a single urgent phone call. His phone rang at 6:47 a.m., while I was making coffee and watching the sunrise through our kitchen windows. The peaceful morning routine we'd shared for years was about to be shattered by a lie, so elaborate and cruel that I still can't believe how easily I accepted it. Alex grabbed the phone with unusual urgency, his voice immediately shifting to that formal tone he reserved for serious family matters. I watched him pace our kitchen, his free hand running through his dark hair in the way it always did when he was stressed. "What? When did this happen? Is she okay?" His voice carried genuine concern, the kind of worried tension I'd heard during his grandfather's heart attack 2 years earlier. "Of course, I'll be there immediately. Don't worry about anything else right now." He hung up and turned to me, his face grave with what appeared to be authentic distress. Those blue eyes that had convinced me to marry him looked genuinely troubled, and I felt my own anxiety spike in response. "Babe, I have to get to Portland right now. My Aunt Jessica had some kind of serious medical episode last night. She's in the hospital, and the family needs me there." Jessica Ellis was Alex's aunt on his mother's side, a woman in her early 70s who'd always been the warmest member of his family toward me. At every gathering, she'd ask detailed questions about my work at the marketing agency, remember projects I'd mentioned months earlier, and always made sure to include me in family conversations when others might have overlooked me. She'd even helped me navigate some of the Ellis family's more complicated social expectations during my first few years of marriage. If Jessica was truly having a medical emergency, of course Alex needed to be there. Family came first, always. "Oh my God, is she going to be okay?" I set down my coffee mug immediately, already mentally rearranging my weekend plans. What kind of medical episode? They're not sure yet. Something with her heart, maybe a stroke. The doctors are still running tests. Alex moved with focused efficiency toward our bedroom, already planning his departure. Mom is completely beside herself, and Dad's already driving down from Tacoma. I need to throw some things in a bag and get on the road within the hour. "I'll come with you," I said without hesitation. "Jessica would want to see both of us, and your mother will need all the support she can get during something this scary." Alex paused in the doorway to our bedroom, and something flickered across his face so quickly I almost missed it. A micro-expression that didn't match the crisis situation, something that looked almost like panic or calculation. "Honestly, the hospital is limiting visitors because of how critical her condition is. They're only allowing immediate family members right now, and even then only 2 at a time." He was already pulling clothes from our closet, his movements efficient and practiced. "Plus, you have that huge presentation on Monday you've been working on for weeks. The Henderson Industries pitch could make or break the quarter for your agency." He was right about the presentation. I'd been preparing for months to pitch a comprehensive marketing campaign to Henderson Industries, a potential client whose account could bring in over $300,000 in revenue. Monday's meeting was crucial, and I still had hours of preparation left to ensure every detail was perfect. But family emergencies trumped work deadlines. They always had in our marriage. The presentation can wait, Alex. I can practice my talking points in the car while you drive, or work on my laptop in the hospital waiting room. Family comes first, especially when Jessica's been so good to me over the years.
I know, and I love that about you, Olivia. It's one of the things that made me fall in love with you. He moved around our bedroom with practiced efficiency, folding his clothes into his weekend bag with the kind of care he usually reserved for business trips. But there's really nothing you can do at the hospital right now, and the visitor restrictions are apparently pretty strict because of her condition. I'll probably just be sitting in waiting rooms most of the time anyway. I watched him pack the navy blazer I'd bought him for his birthday, the one that brought out the blue in his eyes and made him look particularly handsome. It seemed like an odd choice for a hospital vigil, but people responded to stress differently. Maybe he wanted to look put together for his family during a crisis. How long do you think you'll need to stay? Probably through the weekend, maybe into Monday, depending on how she responds to treatment. He folded his good dress shoes into the bag, the Italian leather ones he wore to important business meetings. I'll call you tonight with updates once I know more about her prognosis. The concern in his voice seemed so genuine, so consistent with the man I'd married. Alex had always been devoted to his family, sometimes to a fault. When his grandfather was hospitalized, he'd taken a week off work to be there every day. When his mother had surgery the previous year, he'd managed her entire recovery schedule and coordinated care with military precision. This response felt exactly like the Alex I knew, responsible, caring, putting family needs above everything else. Of course, I'll handle everything here so you can focus completely on Jessica and supporting your parents. I helped him carry his bags to the car, standing in our driveway in my pajamas and slippers while he loaded everything into the trunk. Our neighbor, Mrs. Chen, was already in her garden, watering her prize-winning roses and waving good morning like this was any other ordinary Thursday. Everything felt normal, routine even. A family emergency requiring an urgent trip out of town. These situations happened in long marriages, in complicated families, in real life, where medical crises didn't follow convenient schedules. Drive safely, I called as he backed out of our driveway, and tell Jessica that I'm thinking of her and praying for a quick recovery. I will. Love you, Olivia. Love you too, Alex. I watched his silver sedan disappear around the corner of our quiet residential street, then went back inside to get ready for what I assumed would be a normal workday, followed by a quiet weekend alone while my husband supported his family through a medical crisis. I had no idea that I'd just watched my husband leave for his sister's luxury wedding, an event I'd been deliberately excluded from, carrying clothes I'd helped him choose for an occasion I knew nothing about. The man I trusted with my whole heart was driving toward the most elaborate deception of our 6-year marriage, and I was already planning how to be the perfect supportive wife from a distance. The Ellis family had always operated with a certain level of formality that took me years to decode and even longer to navigate successfully. They weren't warm and chaotic like my own family, where everyone talked over each other at dinner and hugged hello and goodbye without thinking twice. The Ellis family scheduled their affection, planned their gatherings months in advance, and maintained unspoken rules about everything from appropriate hostess gifts to proper seating arrangements at holiday dinners. When Alex and I first started dating 8 years ago, I'd found their structured approach to family relationships charming, even sophisticated. Coming from a family where my mother would call at random hours just to chat, and my father would show up unannounced with takeout pizza, the Ellis family's organized approach felt refreshingly mature and intentional. His mother, Demi Ellis, would send handwritten thank you notes on cream-colored stationery for the simplest gestures: a bottle of wine brought to dinner, a birthday card sent on time, even a compliment about her garden. His father, Malcolm, maintained detailed calendars of family birthdays, anniversaries, and important dates, sending reminders to family members weeks in advance so no one would forget or appear unprepared. His sister, Chloe, 3 years younger than Alex and equally organized, had always been polite to me in that careful way that suggested she was following some internal protocol for how to treat her brother's girlfriend and later his wife. We'd never developed the easy, comfortable relationship I'd hoped for, but I'd assumed that would come with time.
Over 6 years of marriage, I'd learned to navigate their complex social expectations with increasing skill. I brought appropriate hostess gifts to every gathering. Never flowers, because Demi preferred to arrange her own, Always wine from a specific price range that showed thoughtfulness without appearing to show off. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I remembered to ask Malcolm about his golf handicap, and Demi about her book club's latest selection. I sent birthday cards exactly 2 weeks in advance, timed perfectly between seeming overeager and appearing thoughtless. Most importantly, I'd learned to appreciate and expect advance notice for everything. The Ellis family didn't do spontaneous gatherings or last-minute invitations. Christmas dinner plans were finalized by October, complete with assigned dishes and arrival times. Summer vacation destinations were researched and booked by February, with detailed itineraries shared among family members by April. When Chloe had gotten engaged to Tony Morgan 18 months ago, she'd announced their timeline with military precision during Sunday dinner: engagement party in 6 months, wedding in 2 years, reception at a venue that required booking 3 years in advance. The announcement had been accompanied by a detailed presentation including preliminary budget numbers, seasonal considerations, and a rough guest count. I'd been genuinely excited about the wedding planning process, not because I particularly enjoyed wedding details, but because it finally felt like an opportunity to bond with Chloe in a meaningful way. We were both detail-oriented professionals. She worked as an interior designer specializing in luxury residential projects, while I managed large-scale event marketing campaigns for corporate clients. Wedding planning seemed like natural common ground where our professional skills would complement each other perfectly, and initially, it had been exactly that. Chloe had called me in January, 9 months before the planned wedding date, sounding genuinely enthusiastic about collaborating. "Olivia, I know you're absolutely brilliant with venue research from all the corporate events you've planned. Would you mind helping me put together a comprehensive list of potential locations? I'm thinking something elegant but not stuffy, sophisticated but not pretentious, maybe with mountain views if possible." I'd thrown myself into the project with professional thoroughness and personal enthusiasm. I spent over 20 hours researching venues throughout the Pacific Northwest, creating a detailed spreadsheet that included capacity, catering options, pricing tiers, photo galleries, and seasonal availability. I'd included notes about weather contingency plans, accessibility considerations, and even recommendations for local vendors I'd worked with on corporate retreats. It was the kind of comprehensive research I typically charged clients $3,000 for, but I was thrilled to do it for family. Finally, I had something valuable to contribute to the Ellis family dynamic, beyond polite conversation and punctual thank you notes. Chloe had been genuinely thrilled with my work. "This is incredibly helpful, Olivia. You've found venues I never would have discovered on my own, and your cost analysis is exactly what I needed to present options to Mom and Dad." Over the following months, she'd occasionally reach out for my input on other wedding details. Did I think spring flowers would photograph better than summer arrangements for someone with her coloring? Which photographers in my professional network might she contact for destination weddings? Could I recommend florists who specialized in elegant, understated arrangements? I'd always responded promptly and thoroughly, researching her questions with the same professional attention I gave my paying clients. Each conversation felt like we were building the kind of close sister-in-law relationship I'd always hoped for, but never quite achieved. The last detailed conversation we'd had about wedding planning was in March, 8 months before the November wedding date. Chloe had called to thank me for recommending a florist who'd given her an exceptional deal on centerpieces and bridal bouquets. "I can't believe how perfectly everything is coming together," she'd said, her voice bright with excitement. "The venue you found, the flowers, even the photographer you suggested, it's all exactly what I envisioned. This wedding is going to be absolutely perfect." "I'm so happy for you," I'd replied, genuinely meaning it. "Tony's incredibly lucky to be marrying into the Ellis family. You all have organizational skills that could run a small country." She'd laughed warmly. "Speaking of organization, I promise I'll get save the dates out soon. I know Mom's been anxious about giving everyone enough advance notice, especially for the out-of-town guests."
That conversation had taken place 7 months ago. I'd never received a save the date. When I'd casually mentioned it to Alex in June, he'd explained that they were having printing delays and wanted to finalize some guest list details before sending anything official. In August, when I'd asked about dress shopping or engagement party plans, he'd said Chloe was handling everything with Demi and hadn't wanted to overwhelm me during my busy season at work. I'd accepted these explanations without question because they fit perfectly with everything I understood about the Ellis family's approach to major events. They handled complex logistics internally first, then extended invitations once every detail was settled and confirmed. They probably wanted to surprise me with something special, maybe a role in the ceremony or a particular honor that recognized my contribution to the planning process. Standing in my kitchen that Thursday morning after Alex left for what he claimed was Jessica's medical emergency, I realized with growing unease that I might have been building a relationship with a wedding planning process that had never actually included me as a guest at the wedding itself. The call about Jessica's medical emergency had felt completely authentic because every detail of Alex's performance seemed genuinely distressed. He'd used the exact same tone of voice he'd had when his grandfather was hospitalized with pneumonia 2 years earlier. That particular combination of worry, responsibility, and focused determination that I'd come to recognize as his crisis management mode. His body language matched perfectly, the hand running through his hair, the pacing in our kitchen, the way he immediately started planning logistics while processing emotional shock. This was the same man who'd held my hand in the hospital waiting room when my father had his heart attack the previous spring, who'd coordinated care schedules and managed insurance paperwork while I fell apart with worry. Alex was genuinely good in medical emergencies, calm and organized when everyone else panicked, which made his current behavior seem completely consistent with every crisis we'd navigated together. But as I sat at my desk that Thursday morning, trying to concentrate on the Henderson Industries presentation while Alex supposedly drove toward Portland, small inconsistencies began bothering me like a persistent itch I couldn't quite reach. He had packed his navy blazer for a hospital vigil. The expensive Italian leather dress shoes were folded carefully into his weekend bag, not the comfortable walking shoes he'd worn during his grandfather's week-long hospital stay. When I'd been with my father in intensive care, Alex had changed into old jeans and sneakers by the second day, prioritizing comfort over appearance for what became long hours and uncomfortable waiting room chairs. I'd noticed these details in the moment, but dismissed them because people respond differently to stress, and maybe Alex wanted to look put together for his family during a crisis. Maybe he was planning to attend a business meeting if Jessica's condition stabilized and he didn't need to remain at the hospital for the entire weekend. The more I thought about it, though, the more his packing choices seemed oddly formal for someone preparing to spend days in a medical facility. Around noon, I texted him, "How's Jessica doing? Any updates from the doctors about her condition?" His response came 3 hours later. "Still waiting for test results. Family's pretty stressed about everything. This might take longer than expected." The message felt strangely impersonal for someone sitting in a hospital waiting room with his devastated family. Usually, when Alex dealt with family medical situations, his texts were more emotional and detailed. During his grandfather's hospitalization, he'd sent me hourly updates describing conversations with doctors, sharing his mother's emotional state, expressing his own fears and frustrations about hospital bureaucracy and insurance complications. This response sounded like a status update he might send to a casual acquaintance, not a detailed report for his wife who was worried about his family and supporting him from a distance. I tried calling him at 6 p.m., expecting to catch him during a dinner break or a quiet moment between family discussions and medical consultations. "Hey, babe," he answered on the third ring, and immediately I could hear background noise that didn't sound remotely like a hospital environment. There was laughter, upbeat music, the kind of ambient celebration sound you'd expect at a restaurant or party, not the hushed, sterile atmosphere of an intensive care unit. "How are you holding up? That doesn't sound like ICU ambiance in the background."
Oh, we're in the hospital cafeteria right now. They apparently have some kind of music playing, trying to keep spirits up for families dealing with long-term situations, I guess. His explanation came quickly, almost rehearsed. Jessica's stable, but they're keeping her for extended observation. That's good news about her being stable. Can I talk to your mom for a minute? I want to let her know I'm thinking about her, and ask if there's anything I can do to help from here. She's actually with Jessica right now. Visiting hours are pretty restricted because of her condition, so they're only allowing 2 family members at a time. The conversation continued for several more minutes, with Alex providing vague updates that somehow managed to convey no real information about Jessica's actual medical situation. She was stable but still concerning. The doctors were running comprehensive tests but hadn't shared any specific results with the family. Everyone was hanging in there emotionally, but feeling anxious about the uncertainty. After we hung up, I realized he hadn't actually told me anything concrete about Jessica's condition, what kind of medical episode she'd experienced, what symptoms had brought her to the hospital, what the doctors suspected might be wrong, or what they expected for her recovery timeline. But medical emergencies could be confusing and overwhelming, especially in the early stages when families were still gathering information, and doctors were being cautious about making premature diagnoses. I'd been through enough health crises with my own family to know that details often remained frustratingly unclear for days, while medical teams ran tests, consulted specialists, and waited for lab results. Alex's vague updates might simply reflect the reality of a complex medical situation where the doctors themselves weren't ready to provide definitive information to worried family members. That evening, I decided to send Jessica a get well card. I drove to the drugstore after dinner, spending nearly 20 minutes in the greeting card aisle, selecting something appropriate for a serious but hopefully not terminal medical situation. Not too cheerful for what might be a grave diagnosis, but not so somber as to seem pessimistic about her recovery prospects. I chose a card with a simple, elegant design, and a message about thinking of her during a difficult time. Inside, I wrote a heartfelt note about hoping for her quick recovery, and letting her know that Alex and I were both sending our love and support. Then I realized I didn't know which hospital she was in. Alex had mentioned Portland, but Portland had multiple major medical facilities: OHSU, Providence Portland Medical Center, Legacy Good Samaritan, among others. I'd need to call him back to ask for the specific hospital name and Jessica's room number, so I could mail the card directly to her. When I called at 9 p.m., his phone went straight to voicemail. Hospital cell phone policies, I reasoned. Many medical facilities had restrictions about phone usage in patient care areas, especially in intensive care units where electronic devices might interfere with sensitive medical equipment. I left a detailed message: "Hey, it's me. I bought a get well card for Jessica, and want to make sure it reaches her. Can you text me the specific hospital name and her room number when you get this? I know room assignments sometimes change, but I want to send something to brighten her day. Love you, and give my best to everyone." He didn't respond that night. When I woke up Friday morning, there was a text message sent at 11:47 p.m. "Sorry, incredibly long day with family and medical consultations. Jessica's at Portland General, but her room number keeps changing depending on her treatment status and monitoring needs. Might be easier to just send the card to her home address instead." That seemed perfectly reasonable. Hospital patients often got moved between different units and rooms as their condition changed, and mail delivery within medical facilities could be unreliable or delayed. Sending the card to her home address would ensure she received it whether she was still hospitalized or had been discharged by the time it arrived. I addressed the card to Jessica Ellis at her home address and dropped it in the mailbox on my way to work Friday morning, feeling good about this small gesture of support during what I believed was a genuine family medical crisis. I had no idea that while I was carefully writing get well wishes to his supposedly hospitalized aunt, Alex was probably getting fitted for his wedding tuxedo or rehearsing his best man speech for the luxury celebration he'd lied about attending.
Friday evening, alone in our house while Alex dealt with what I believed was a devastating family crisis, I decided to do something meaningful for the entire Ellis family. Medical emergencies were emotionally and physically exhausting, and I knew they'd all been essentially living at the hospital for over 24 hours. The least I could do was arrange for some proper comfort food to be delivered, something that would nourish them during this stressful time without requiring anyone to leave Jessica's bedside. I spent nearly an hour researching Portland restaurants that offered delivery to hospital locations, finally settling on a place called Healing Kitchen that specialized in healthy comfort food designed specifically for families dealing with medical situations. Their menu featured hearty soups, artisan sandwiches made with organic ingredients, fresh salads, and desserts that weren't too heavy for people under stress. I placed a substantial order, enough food for Alex, his parents, Chloe, Tony, and several extras in case other family members or close friends had joined them at the hospital. I selected tomato basil soup with grilled cheese sandwiches, Caesar salads with grilled chicken, butternut squash soup, turkey and avocado wraps, and an assortment of cookies and brownies for dessert. I included a handwritten note that the restaurant would attach to the delivery. Thinking of you all during this incredibly difficult time, hoping Jessica feels better soon and that you're all taking care of yourselves too. All my love, Olivia. The delivery was scheduled for 6 p.m. Saturday evening, right during typical dinner hours, when I figured they'd most appreciate not having to navigate hospital cafeteria food or leave Jessica's side to search for restaurants in an unfamiliar area. I felt genuinely good about this gesture. It was exactly the kind of thoughtful, practical support that the Ellis family appreciated. Helpful without being intrusive, generous without being overwhelming, showing care through actions rather than empty words. Saturday morning, I also decided to handle several errands and responsibilities that Alex usually managed, wanting to completely clear his schedule so he could focus entirely on family needs without worrying about anything at home. I took his car to get the oil changed, picked up both of our dry cleaning, and stopped by his office to water the collection of plants he'd been carefully nurturing for months. While at his office, I gathered some client files he'd mentioned needing to review the previous week, thinking he might appreciate having work distractions during long hours of waiting around the hospital with nothing to do but worry. I organized everything neatly in his leather briefcase and left it by our front door in case he called needing me to overnight any documents to Portland. I was being the supportive wife I'd always strived to be, anticipating needs and handling responsibilities so Alex could focus entirely on what mattered most, his family during a genuine medical crisis. That afternoon, I also called my own mother to update her about the situation. Mom had always been fond of Alex and had grown particularly close to Jessica over the years. At our last Christmas gathering, they'd spent nearly 2 hours discussing gardening techniques and sharing stories about their favorite perennial varieties. "Oh no, that's absolutely terrible about Jessica," Mom said, her voice immediately filled with concern. "She's such a genuinely sweet woman, and she was in such good health when we saw her at Christmas. What kind of medical episode did she have?" Alex said something with her heart, possibly a stroke. The doctors are still running tests to determine exactly what happened. Is there anything I can do to help? Should I send flowers to the hospital, or would a care package for the family be more appropriate? I think they just need time and space right now to focus on Jessica's recovery. Alex is handling everything beautifully, and I'm trying to support him from here without getting in the way of the medical team or family dynamics. You're such a thoughtful wife, Olivia. Not everyone would be so understanding about being left out of a family crisis like this. I'm not being left out, Mom. I'm just respecting the hospital's visitor restrictions and letting Alex focus on what his family needs most right now. Still, it can't be easy being home alone while he deals with something this serious and frightening. It's really fine. That's what marriage is about, supporting each other through difficult times, even when it means personal sacrifice and putting the other person's family obligations first. We talked for another few minutes about Jessica's condition, though I realized I couldn't provide much specific information beyond what Alex had shared in his brief, vague updates. Mom offered to send flowers or a care package, and I promised to get more detailed hospital information from Alex once the immediate crisis had stabilized. After hanging up, I felt genuinely proud of how maturely I was handling this challenging situation. I wasn't being needy or demanding attention during a family medical emergency. I wasn't insisting on involvement where hospital policies might not permit it, or where my presence might not be helpful. I was being understanding, supportive, and putting Alex's family needs above my own desire to be included. I was also unconsciously enabling the most elaborate deception of our 6-year marriage. That evening, I prepared Alex's favorite comfort food, homemade chicken soup with fresh bread, and packaged it carefully so I could overnight it to Portland if he wanted something from home during the stressful weekend. I also gathered some of his favorite books, his comfortable reading pillow, and a care package of toiletries and snacks, thinking he might need supplies for an extended hospital stay. I took photos of everything I'd organized and texted them to Alex with a message. Have all your favorites ready to send if you need comfort from home. Just let me know what would be most helpful. His response came hours later. You're amazing. Family situation is really intense. We'll call when I can. I went to bed that night feeling like a good wife, a supportive partner who was handling a difficult situation with grace and maturity. I was proud of my selflessness, my understanding of family obligations, my willingness to sacrifice my own needs for Alex's family crisis. I had no idea that every gesture of support was enabling his betrayal. Every understanding response was making it easier for him to lie to me. Every act of love was being twisted into evidence that I could be deceived without consequence. The chicken soup I'd made would go bad in our refrigerator while Alex ate wedding cake. The care package I'd assembled would sit unused while he celebrated at a luxury resort. The restaurant delivery I'd arranged would be rejected because the Ellis family wasn't at any hospital. They were at a luxury mountain resort, toasting the bride and groom while I worried about their supposedly hospitalized relative. I was being the perfect wife to a man who was treating our marriage like an inconvenience to be managed around his real priorities. And the most devastating part was that I was doing it willingly, lovingly, with complete trust in the man who was systematically betraying that trust with every text message, every vague update, every carefully crafted lie about where he was and what he was doing. Saturday afternoon, I was curled up on our living room couch with my laptop, putting the finishing touches on my Henderson Industries presentation. The house felt unusually quiet without Alex's presence, but I'd grown comfortable with the solitude, even finding it productive for the detailed work that required my complete concentration. Around 3 p.m., I decided to take a break and check my social media while sipping the chamomile tea I'd been drinking to calm my nerves about Monday's crucial presentation. I opened Instagram almost mindlessly, the way you do when you need a few minutes of mental distraction from intense work. The first few posts in my feed were typical Saturday content: friends posting brunch photos, workout selfies, cozy autumn scenes with pumpkin-spiced everything. I scrolled absently, double-tapping a few images while my mind was still half-focused on marketing strategies and budget projections. Then I saw something that made my blood freeze in my veins. A story post from Owen Snyder, Tony's college roommate who I'd met several times at Ellis family gatherings. The image showed him in a formal black tuxedo, grinning widely next to what appeared to be an elaborate floral arch. He was holding a champagne flute, and behind him I could see the edge of what looked like a very elegant, very expensive venue setup. The caption read, "So honored to stand up for my boy Tony on his big day. #wedding-vibes. #best man duties." I stared at that post for a full 30 seconds, my brain struggling to process what I was seeing. Tony's big day. Wedding vibes. Best man duties. My hands started trembling as I screenshot the image, then immediately clicked on Owen's profile to see if there were more posts. There were multiple stories and posts from what was clearly a wedding celebration in progress. A photo of a stunning outdoor ceremony setup with white chairs arranged in perfect rows facing a mountain vista. Another image of Tony in his tuxedo, beaming next to someone whose face was cut off by the frame, but whose elegant white dress was clearly visible. A video of what sounded like live classical music playing while guests took their seats. Each image was like a physical blow. This wasn't some random wedding Owen happened to be attending. This was Tony Morgan's wedding. Tony, who was engaged to Chloe Ellis. Chloe, whose wedding I had spent months helping to plan. I clicked frantically through Owen's stories, looking for more evidence, more context, anything that might explain what I was seeing. Then I found the image that shattered my world completely. A group photo of the groomsmen, all in matching black tuxedos, standing in front of what I immediately recognized as Timberline Lodge on Mount Hood, one of the venues I'd researched and recommended to Chloe during our early planning conversations, the venue she'd ultimately chosen for her November wedding. And there, standing third from the left with his arm around Tony's shoulders, wearing the navy blazer I'd bought him for his birthday, was my husband, Alex. He wasn't at a hospital in Portland. He wasn't sitting vigil beside his aunt's bedside. He was at his sister's wedding, dressed in formal attire, celebrating with the entire Ellis family, while I sat at home alone, worried sick about a medical emergency that didn't exist. My laptop nearly slipped from my hands as the reality crashed over me. The medical emergency was a lie. Jessica wasn't in the hospital. The Ellis family wasn't gathered around a bedside, holding vigil and praying for recovery. They were celebrating, they were toasting, they were dancing and laughing and taking photos at the luxury mountain wedding I'd helped them plan, and I hadn't been invited. I screenshot every single image I could find, my hands shaking so badly I could barely operate the phone. Each photo was another piece of evidence that my husband had lied to me, that his entire family had participated in excluding me from one of their most important celebrations. Then I made the mistake of checking Tony's Instagram profile directly. His most recent post, uploaded just an hour earlier, showed him and Chloe in their full wedding attire, standing together against the backdrop of Mount Hood's snow-covered peak. Chloe looked absolutely radiant in a designer gown that probably cost more than my car. Tony was beaming in his tuxedo, and both of them looked like they were living the happiest day of their lives. The caption read, "Just married my best friend and the love of my life. Couldn't ask for a more perfect day or a more beautiful venue. Hashtag Chloe and Tony, hashtag Mount Hood wedding, hashtag best day ever." I scrolled through the comments, seeing congratulations from dozens of people I recognized. Ellis family friends, Tony's coworkers, mutual acquaintances from various social circles. People who clearly knew about this wedding, who had been invited to celebrate, who were part of the joy and excitement. I wasn't among them. Then I saw a comment that made my stomach drop even further. From Demi Ellis, Alex's mother. "So grateful to celebrate such a beautiful love story with our entire family. Chloe, you made the most gorgeous bride. Welcome to the family officially, Tony." Our entire family? Everyone had been there. Everyone except me. I called Alex without thinking, my fingers hitting his contact before I could stop myself. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times, then went straight to voicemail. "Hi, you've reached Alex. I can't come to the phone right now, but leave a message and I'll get back to you as soon as possible." I hung up without leaving a message, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I waited exactly 2 minutes and called again. Voicemail again. Then my phone buzzed with a text from him. "Can't talk right now. Family situation is really intense. We'll call you later tonight." I stared at that message for a long time. Family situation is really intense. He was technically telling the truth. It was a family situation, and it was probably intense with all the wedding celebration excitement. But he was using my concern about Jessica's supposed medical crisis to avoid talking to me while he partied with his family. I walked to our bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. My face was pale, my eyes wide with shock and hurt. I looked like someone who had just discovered that everything they believed about their life was a lie. Because that's exactly what had happened. I had spent 2 days worried sick about Jessica, arranging care packages and restaurant deliveries, handling Alex's errands and responsibilities, being the perfect supportive wife. I spent the next hour systematically documenting every piece of evidence I could find, approaching this betrayal with the same methodical thoroughness I used for my most complex marketing campaigns. If I was going to confront Alex with this deception, I needed irrefutable proof that couldn't be explained away or dismissed. I started with Owen Snyder's social media, screenshotting every wedding-related post and story. Then I moved through the tagged accounts systematically, following the digital trail of the Ellis family's elaborate celebration like a detective building a case. Malcolm Ellis, Alex's father, had posted a formal family portrait taken in front of Timberline Lodge's iconic stone facade. Everyone was dressed in their wedding finest, the men in black tuxedos, the women in elegant cocktail dresses. The caption read, "Proud father moment, celebrating Khloe and Tony's perfect day. Our family is complete." I zoomed in on every face in that photo. Alex stood next to his mother, his arm around her shoulders, both of them beaming with genuine happiness. Khloe looked radiant in her wedding dress, holding Tony's hand while surrounded by extended family members I recognized from years of holiday gatherings. The timestamp showed it was posted just 2 hours ago. Demi Ellis had been even more active on social media throughout the day. Her Instagram was filled with behind-the-scenes moments that told the complete story of a luxury wedding celebration. A photo of Khloe getting her makeup done in what appeared to be a bridal suite with the caption, "My beautiful daughter on her special morning." Another image of the ceremony setup showing hundreds of white roses and peonies arranged in the exact configuration I'd helped Khloe research during our planning sessions. But it was Demi's video post that hit me like a physical blow. A short clip of the father-daughter dance, with Malcolm spinning Khloe across what looked like a professional dance floor, while a live string quartet played in the background. You could hear the guests laughing and applauding, see the joy on everyone's faces as they celebrated this moment. And there, clearly visible in the background, was Alex. He was clapping enthusiastically, his face bright with the kind of unguarded happiness I rarely saw at home anymore. He looked completely present, completely engaged, like he was exactly where he wanted to be. I found more evidence on Khloe's own Instagram account. She'd posted a carousel of professional wedding photos that must have been taken and edited with remarkable speed. The first image showed her and Tony during their ceremony, exchanging vows against the dramatic backdrop of Mount Hood. The second was a group shot of the entire wedding party, including Alex in his role as what appeared to be Tony's best man. The third photo made me gasp out loud. It was a candid shot of Alex giving what looked like a best man speech, standing at a podium with a microphone, gesturing toward the happy couple while guests listened intently. His expression was animated, clearly mid-story, probably sharing some heartfelt or humorous anecdote about Tony and Khloe's relationship. My husband was giving speeches at his sister's wedding, a wedding I'd helped plan but hadn't been invited to attend. I kept digging deeper, following every tagged account, every location tag, every hashtag associated with the celebration. The mountain of evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Tony's groomsmen had all posted photos from various moments throughout the day, getting ready in their hotel rooms, taking formal portraits before the ceremony, raising toasts during what appeared to be an elaborate reception dinner. In every group shot, Alex was prominently featured, clearly an integral part of the entire celebration. I found vendor posts that provided even more details about the scale and expense of this event. The florist had shared images of the elaborate arrangements, tagging them with hashtag Ellis Morgan Wedding and describing them as their most ambitious mountain venue installation this season. The photographer had posted a preview gallery showcasing the stunning mountain scenery and elegant reception setup. This wasn't a small, intimate family ceremony. This was exactly the kind of luxury celebration Khloe had described during our early planning conversations, a major production that had clearly taken months of coordination and significant financial investment. Then I discovered the most damning evidence yet. Jessica Ellis, the aunt who was supposedly hospitalized with a medical emergency, had posted a selfie from what was clearly the wedding reception. She was beaming next to another elderly woman I recognized as Alex's grandmother, both of them dressed in formal evening wear, with the caption, "Nothing makes me happier than celebrating family love stories. What a perfect day for Khloe and Tony."
Jessica wasn't in a hospital bed. She wasn't fighting for her life or recovering from a stroke. She was at the wedding, dressed in formal attire, celebrating with everyone else while I sat at home making chicken soup and organizing care packages for her supposed medical crisis. The timestamp on her post showed it was uploaded 30 minutes ago. I called the restaurant where I'd ordered the family meal delivery, my hands still shaking with rage and disbelief. "Hi, this is Olivia Harlan.
I placed a large order for delivery to Portland General Hospital earlier today, scheduled for 6 p.m. I need to cancel that immediately. Oh, you're calling just in time, the restaurant staff member said. Our delivery driver actually just called from the hospital. They said there's no family by that name waiting for food delivery, and hospital security wouldn't let him access the patient floors without proper authorization. My stomach dropped. They couldn't find the Ellis family at all? No, ma'am. The hospital staff checked their patient registry and visitor logs. There's no one named Ellis currently admitted, and no one by that name has signed in as visitors today. Our driver was pretty confused about where to leave the food order. I thanked them and hung up, feeling sick. Even my gesture of support had been rejected because the Ellis family wasn't at any hospital. They were at a luxury mountain resort, celebrating a wedding while I worried about their fictional medical crisis. I took screenshots of everything, every post, every comment, every piece of evidence that proved my husband had lied to me about the most basic facts of where he was and what he was doing. By the time I finished documenting the betrayal, I had over 50 images saved to my phone, creating an undeniable timeline of deception. The Ellis family hadn't just excluded me from Chloe's wedding, they had actively collaborated to deceive me, creating an elaborate fictional emergency to explain Alex's absence while they celebrated one of their most important family milestones. I had been systematically erased from their celebration, replaced with a lie so detailed and convincing that I'd spent days being the perfect supportive wife to a husband who was treating me like an inconvenience to be managed around his real priorities. The most devastating part wasn't just the exclusion, it was the realization that this level of deception required planning, coordination, and the willing participation of Alex's entire family. This wasn't a spontaneous decision or an oversight. This was deliberate. This was calculated. This was a family choosing to celebrate without me and then lying about it to my face. Sitting on my bathroom floor with my laptop open and dozens of wedding photos spread across my phone screen, I began to trace back through the months of subtle exclusions that had led to this moment. What I dismissed as typical Ellis family formality now revealed itself as a systematic pattern of deliberately keeping me at arm's length. The realization hit me like a cold wave. This wasn't the first time I'd been excluded from their celebrations. It was just the first time I'd discovered it through social media evidence that couldn't be explained away. I opened my calendar app and started scrolling backward through the months, cross-referencing dates with my memory of Ellis family interactions. The patterns emerged with devastating clarity. In September, Alex had mentioned that his parents were having a small dinner party for Malcolm's birthday. Just immediate family, he'd said. Dad specifically requested something low-key this year. I'd accepted that explanation, even offering to help prepare something Alex could bring to contribute to the meal. But now I remembered seeing a photo on Demi's Facebook a few days later, a formal dining room set for 12 people with elegant place settings and professional floral arrangements, far from the low-key, immediate family dinner Alex had described. I'd noticed the photo but hadn't thought much about it at the time. Now I realized I'd been looking at evidence of my own systematic exclusion. In July, there had been Malcolm's retirement celebration. Alex had told me it was just a casual lunch at their country club, mostly Dad's golf buddies and some work colleagues. He'd said spouses weren't really included because it would be boring business talk and golf stories. I pulled up the country club's social media page and searched their event photos from July. There it was, a formal retirement luncheon with over 40 attendees, including numerous couples I recognized from previous Ellis family gatherings. The women were dressed in elegant summer outfits, clearly there as honored guests, not reluctant participants in boring business conversations. Alex had lied to me about that event, too. Going further back, I found the evidence I'd been unconsciously collecting for months. Easter dinner at the Ellis house in April, Alex had said his mother was keeping it very small this year because she was stressed about some home renovations. I'd assumed that meant just the immediate family, but I'd seen photos later on Jessica's social media showing a full formal dinner with extended family members who supposedly hadn't been invited. The graduation party for Alex's cousin in May, I'd been told it was canceled due to bad weather, But social media posts showed it had simply been moved indoors to a restaurant, proceeding exactly as planned with full family attendance. His grandmother's 80th birthday celebration in June, Alex had said she specifically requested no gifts and no big fuss, just a quiet family dinner. I'd respected her wishes and stayed home. Later, I'd seen posts showing an elaborate surprise party with a professional photographer and a custom cake. Each individual exclusion had seemed reasonable at the time. Hospital visitor restrictions, work obligations, weather cancellations, small family preferences. But viewed together, they formed an unmistakable pattern of systematic deception designed to keep me away from Ellis family celebrations. The most devastating realization was that these exclusions had been escalating in frequency and elaborateness. What had started with casual dinner exclusions had grown into full-scale event deceptions, culminating in the fictional medical emergency that covered his sister's wedding. I started looking more carefully at the timing of these exclusions, and another pattern emerged that made my stomach sink. Every single event I'd been excluded from had involved extended family members. Aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents. The only Ellis family gatherings I was invited to were the minimum legally required occasions where my absence would be socially unacceptable. Christmas dinner, Thanksgiving, major holidays where excluding a spouse would raise questions among outsiders. But celebrations that involved the broader Ellis family network, events where they could celebrate among themselves without outside scrutiny, I was systematically excluded from those. This wasn't about hospital policies or space limitations or keeping things low-key. This was about the Ellis family wanting to celebrate their important moments without me present, and Alex was the willing facilitator of my exclusion. I thought about all the times I'd made excuses for feeling unwelcome at Ellis family gatherings, the conversations that stopped when I entered rooms, the inside jokes I was never included in, the family photos where I somehow always ended up positioned at the edge of the group, easily cropped out later. I'd convinced myself I was being oversensitive, that every family had complex dynamics, that I needed to be patient while they adjusted to me being part of their family structure. But they hadn't been adjusting to include me. They'd been perfecting the art of excluding me while maintaining plausible deniability. The wedding venue research I'd done for Chloe suddenly took on a different meaning. She hadn't asked for my help because she valued my professional expertise or wanted to bond with me. She'd asked because she needed detailed information about luxury venues, and I was a free resource who would do professional quality work without charging for it. I'd been used for my skills and connections, then systematically excluded from the celebration those skills had made possible. The florist recommendations, the photographer contacts, the seasonal planning advice, all of it had been extracted from me to help create the perfect wedding experience for everyone except me. I looked back through my text conversations with Chloe over the past months. Every interaction had been transactional. She'd reach out when she needed information or advice, then disappear until the next time she required my professional expertise. There had been no casual conversations, no relationship building, no genuine interest in my life or thoughts. I'd been treated like a vendor, not a family member. The Ellis family had developed a sophisticated system for managing me. Include me just enough to maintain the appearance of family acceptance, extract whatever value I could provide, then exclude me from the actual celebrations while creating elaborate justifications for my absence. And Alex had been the orchestrator of it all, the person who knew me well enough to craft lies I'd believe, who understood my work schedule well enough to time exclusions when I'd be too busy to investigate, who knew my trusting nature well enough to exploit it completely. Sitting there, surrounded by evidence of my own systematic erasure, I realized that my marriage hadn't been slowly deteriorating. It had been a carefully maintained illusion designed to keep me compliant while Alex's real family life happened without me.
The most painful part was recognizing how willingly I'd participated in my own exclusion, how eagerly I'd accepted every explanation, how grateful I'd been for whatever scraps of inclusion they'd offered me. I'd been so desperate to belong to the Ellis family that I'd convinced myself that being systematically excluded was normal, that being treated as an outsider was just their family style, that being lied to was preferable to being alone. But I wasn't going to be that person anymore. The complete scope of the betrayal hit me in waves, each realization more devastating than the last. I sat on our bathroom floor, surrounded by evidence of my own systematic exclusion, feeling like the foundation of my entire adult life was crumbling beneath me. This wasn't just about missing a wedding. This was about discovering that the person I'd trusted most in the world had been systematically lying to me for months, possibly years. The man who'd promised to love and honor me had been orchestrating my exclusion from his family while maintaining the pretense that I mattered to him. I looked around our bathroom, the space we'd renovated together 2 years ago, where I'd carefully selected every tile and fixture while Alex offered his input and approval. I thought we were building a life together, creating a home that reflected both of our tastes and dreams. Now I realized I might have been building a stage set for a performance that only I believed was real. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. I tried calling my sister Aster, needing to talk to someone who would understand the magnitude of what I discovered, but I couldn't find the words to explain what was happening. How do you tell someone that your marriage has been revealed as an elaborate lie? How do you describe the feeling of realizing you've been living in a carefully constructed illusion? Instead, I just sat there, scrolling through wedding photos that documented the celebration I'd been excluded from, feeling a kind of emotional whiplash that left me disoriented and nauseous. The photos showed such genuine happiness. Alex's smile in the wedding pictures was more radiant than any expression I'd seen from him in months at home. His posture was relaxed, confident, like he was exactly where he belonged. In the background of reception photos, I could see him laughing with family members, engaging in animated conversations, looking completely at ease. This was the version of Alex I'd fallen in love with 8 years ago, warm, engaged, present. But that person apparently only existed when I wasn't around. At home with me, Alex had become increasingly distant over the past year. Conversations felt stilted and careful. Physical affection had become perfunctory, scheduled around his other obligations. Even our moments of intimacy felt like items being checked off a list rather than genuine connection. I'd attributed this distance to work stress, to the natural ebb and flow of long-term relationships, to the busyness of adult life. I'd told myself that all marriages went through phases, that the intensity of early romance naturally evolved into something more stable and comfortable. But looking at these wedding photos, I realized Alex wasn't experiencing a natural relationship evolution. He was simply happier without me. The man in these photos, laughing, relaxed, genuinely joyful, that was who Alex was when he didn't have to manage me, when he didn't have to maintain the pretense of our marriage, when he could be part of his real family without the burden of including his inconvenient wife. I thought about all the evenings he'd come home from family gatherings I hadn't been invited to. He'd always seemed slightly drained, like he was transitioning back into a less comfortable version of himself. I'd assumed he was tired from social interaction or stressed about work. Now I understood he was tired from having to pretend to be someone he wasn't. With his family, Alex was authentic. With me, he was performing. The tears came then, but not the dramatic sobs I might have expected. Instead, it was a quiet, steady stream that felt like something fundamental inside me was breaking. This wasn't just grief about a missed event or anger about being lied to. This was the deeper pain of recognizing that the person I'd built my life around had never really wanted me as part of his life. I'd spent 6 years trying to earn my place in the Ellis family, modifying my behavior, learning their rules, bringing appropriate gifts, saying the right things. I thought I was gradually winning them over, proving my worth, demonstrating that I could be a valuable addition to their family structure. But they'd never intended to include me. All my efforts, all my careful attention to their preferences and expectations, all my attempts to prove myself worthy, none of it had mattered because the decision to exclude me had already been made. And Alex was the architect of that exclusion.
I thought about the chicken soup sitting in our refrigerator, carefully prepared for a man who was eating wedding cake. The care package I'd assembled, full of comfort items for someone who was celebrating at a luxury resort. The work errands I'd handled, clearing his schedule so he could focus on what I thought was a family crisis, but was actually a family celebration. Every gesture of love and support had been twisted into evidence of how easily I could be deceived, how willing I was to sacrifice for someone who was systematically betraying me. The most devastating part was recognizing my own complicity in the deception. I'd wanted to believe Alex's lies because the alternative, that my husband didn't want me around his family, was too painful to consider. I'd accepted increasingly elaborate explanations because questioning them would have meant confronting the possibility that my marriage wasn't what I thought it was. I'd chosen willful blindness over painful truth, and that choice had enabled years of systematic exclusion. But even worse than recognizing my own denial was understanding that Alex had counted on it. He'd crafted his lies knowing exactly how I'd respond, understanding that my love for him and my desire to belong to his family would make me accept whatever explanation he offered. He'd weaponized my trust against me. Sitting there on our bathroom floor, I felt something shift inside me. The hurt was still there, sharp and immediate, but it was being joined by something else, a cold, clear anger that felt more powerful than any emotion I'd experienced in years. I wasn't just sad about being excluded, I was furious about being manipulated. I wasn't just disappointed about missing a wedding, I was enraged about being treated like someone whose feelings didn't matter enough to warrant basic honesty. Alex had bet that I'd be so grateful for whatever scraps of inclusion he offered that I'd never demand more. He'd assumed that my fear of being alone would keep me compliant, even when he treated me like an inconvenience. He'd gambled that I'd rather live with lies than risk losing the illusion of belonging. But looking at those wedding photos, seeing the genuine happiness on his face in my absence, I realized something that cut through all the pain and confusion. I didn't want to belong somewhere that required me to disappear. I didn't want to be part of a family that celebrated my exclusion. I didn't want to be married to someone who was happier without me than with me. For the first time in 6 years of marriage, I wanted something different, something honest, something real, even if it meant being alone. The transformation from victim to agent happened in a single moment, sitting on our bathroom floor at 8:30 p.m. on a Saturday night. I looked at my reflection in the mirror across from me, eyes red from crying, hair disheveled, still wearing the comfortable clothes I'd put on that morning when I'd believed I was supporting my husband through a family crisis. But the woman looking back at me wasn't broken. She was angry. And anger, I realized, was infinitely more useful than heartbreak. I stood up slowly, my legs stiff from sitting on the cold tile floor for hours. The wedding photos were still spread across my phone screen, documenting the celebration I'd been excluded from, but they no longer felt like evidence of my inadequacy. They felt like evidence of Alex's betrayal and his family's cruelty. More importantly, they felt like ammunition. I walked into our bedroom and opened Alex's closet, looking at the clothes he'd left behind. His casual weekend wardrobe hung neatly arranged, organized by color and season, the way I'd taught him years ago when we'd first moved in together. These were the clothes of the man who supposedly couldn't attend family celebrations with me, who claimed his family's events were too small or too formal or too restricted for spouses. But the formal clothes were gone. The navy blazer, the dress pants, the Italian leather shoes, all the pieces he'd need to look sophisticated at a luxury mountain wedding, those had traveled with him to Portland for his fictional hospital vigil. I pulled out my phone and called Timberline Lodge directly. If Alex could lie to me, I could investigate the truth. Good evening, Timberline Lodge. This is Marcus speaking. How can I help you? Hi, I'm calling about the Ellis Morgan wedding that's taking place at your venue today. I'm supposed to be joining the celebration, but I'm running late due to travel delays. Could you tell me what time the reception is scheduled to end? Oh, the Ellis Morgan wedding. What a beautiful celebration. The reception is scheduled until midnight, but most of our wedding parties tend to go a bit later when they're having such a wonderful time. Are you family or friend of the bride and groom?
My heart pounded, but I kept my voice steady. Family. I'm Alex's wife, but I got held up with a work emergency. Is there still time to join them for dinner? Absolutely. The dinner service just finished about an hour ago, but they're moving into the dancing portion of the evening now. Would you like me to connect you to the bridal suite, or the event coordinator? That's okay. I'll surprise them. Thank you so much. I hung up, having confirmed everything I needed to know. The Ellis Morgan wedding was happening right now, at the venue I'd researched, with Alex in attendance as part of the celebration while I sat at home believing his aunt was in the hospital. But instead of feeling defeated by this confirmation, I felt energized. Clarity was power, and I finally had perfect clarity about what was happening and what I needed to do about it. I opened my laptop and began researching luxury spa resorts near Mount Hood. If the Ellis family could have their celebration at Timberline Lodge, I could have my own weekend at a nearby resort, and if they were going to exclude me from their family photos, I was going to create some photos of my own. I found exactly what I was looking for. Skamania Lodge, a luxury resort just 40 minutes from Timberline Lodge, with spa services, gourmet dining, and spectacular mountain views. They had availability for a last-minute weekend getaway, and their amenities included everything I needed for the perfect solo retreat. I booked a deluxe room with a mountain view, spa treatments for Sunday morning, and dinner reservations at their fine dining restaurant. The total cost was significant, over $800 for one night, but I charged it to the credit card Alex and I shared for major expenses. If he could spend money on formal wear for a wedding I wasn't invited to, I could spend money on a luxury weekend for myself. Next, I packed a bag with the same careful attention Alex had shown when preparing for his supposed hospital vigil. But instead of packing for a medical crisis, I packed for a celebration of my own independence. My best dress, comfortable walking shoes for hiking, elegant pajamas for the spa, and every piece of jewelry I owned that made me feel confident and beautiful. I also packed the folder, containing all the screenshots I'd taken of the wedding evidence. Not because I planned to confront anyone at the resort, but because I wanted to remember exactly why I was there, and what had brought me to this moment of choosing myself over a marriage built on lies. The drive to Skamania Lodge took just over 2 hours, winding through mountain roads that grew more beautiful as I climbed higher into the Cascade Range. With each mile I put between myself and Seattle, I felt lighter, like I was shedding the weight of 6 years of trying to earn my place in a family that had never intended to accept me. I arrived at the lodge at 11 p.m., just as the wedding reception at Timberline was reaching its peak celebration. While Alex danced with his sister and toasted the happy couple, I was checking into my luxury suite, with its floor-to-ceiling windows facing Mount Hood. The irony wasn't lost on me. Alex was celebrating his family at a venue I'd researched while lying about his location, and I was staying at a resort that offered direct views of his celebration while he had no idea where I was. For the first time in our 6-year marriage, I had information he didn't have. I had power he'd never given me permission to claim. I ordered room service, a bottle of champagne and chocolate-covered strawberries, and sat on my private balcony, looking out at the mountain where my husband was pretending I didn't exist. The November night was clear and cold, with stars visible in the dark sky above the snow-covered peaks. I raised my champagne glass toward Timberline Lodge, invisible in the distance, but close enough that we were sharing the same mountain air. To Alex, I said aloud to the empty night, "Thank you for showing me exactly who you are, and exactly what this marriage is worth to you." Then I drank to my own health, to my own worth, and to whatever came next. I wasn't sure what Monday would bring when Alex returned from his fictional hospital vigil, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty: I was done being the woman who accepted lies as love, who mistook exclusion for family dynamics, who chose willful blindness over painful truth. I was done being married to someone who celebrated my absence. Tomorrow I would start documenting my own joy, creating my own celebration, building my own life that didn't require anyone's permission or approval. Tonight, I was going to sleep in a luxury suite, with mountain views, wake up to spa treatments and gourmet breakfast, and remember what it felt like to be somewhere I was genuinely welcome. Even if the only person welcoming me was myself.
The woman who had woken up that morning believing she was supporting her husband through a family crisis was gone. In her place was someone who understood that the only family loyalty that mattered was the loyalty she owed to herself, and that woman was just getting started. Sunday morning at Skamania Lodge dawned crisp and clear, with Mount Hood visible in perfect detail through my suite's floor-to-ceiling windows. I woke up feeling more rested than I had in months, despite the emotional upheaval of the previous day. There was something powerfully restorative about sleeping somewhere I'd chosen for myself, away from the house where I'd been systematically lied to. I ordered room service breakfast and spread my evidence folder across the elegant dining table in my suite. 53 screenshots, printed emails, call logs, and my own detailed timeline of Alex's lies over the past months. If this were a corporate presentation, I'd call it a comprehensive audit of deceptive practices. But this wasn't a business meeting. This was my life, and I needed to approach the coming confrontation with strategic precision. I opened my laptop and began documenting everything methodically, creating a digital presentation that laid out the evidence chronologically. Alex was skilled at deflecting and reframing conversations when challenged, but documented proof was harder to argue against than emotional accusations. First, I created a timeline showing the pattern of exclusions over the past 8 months. Each event Alex had lied about was listed with the excuse he'd given me versus the photographic evidence of what actually happened. The Malcolm's birthday dinner that was supposedly immediate family only, alongside photos of 12 couples celebrating. The retirement luncheon that was supposedly boring business talk with images of elegant celebration, including multiple spouses. Then I compiled the wedding evidence, screenshots showing the entire Ellis family celebrating at Timberline Lodge, while Jessica, who was supposedly hospitalized, posted selfies from the reception. Photos of Alex giving his best man speech while texting me about intensive care waiting rooms. The documentation process was oddly therapeutic. Each piece of evidence I organized felt like reclaiming power that had been systematically taken from me through months of gaslighting and manipulation. Around 10 a.m., I walked down to the lodge's spa for the massage and facial I'd booked. As the massage therapist worked out knots of tension I didn't realize I'd been carrying, I felt my strategy crystallizing. I wasn't going to confront Alex with tears and accusations. I wasn't going to beg for explanations or give him opportunities to craft new lies. I was going to present the evidence calmly and professionally, then inform him of the decisions I'd already made. During my facial, I composed and sent several important emails on my phone. First, I contacted a divorce attorney whose name I'd gotten from a colleague who'd gone through an amicable separation. I requested a consultation for Tuesday morning and briefly outlined my situation. Next, I emailed my boss explaining that I'd need to take personal time Monday and Tuesday to handle a family emergency. Technically true, discovering your marriage is built on lies definitely qualified as a family emergency. I also sent a message to my sister Aster asking if I could stay with her for a few days starting Monday evening. I didn't provide details, just said I needed some space to think about my relationship with Alex. By noon, I had a clear plan for the next 48 hours. Monday, I would work from the lodge, giving myself space to prepare mentally for Alex's return. Tuesday morning, I would meet with the divorce attorney to understand my options. Tuesday evening, when Alex returned from his fictional hospital vigil, I would present him with the evidence and inform him of my decisions. The most important part of my strategy was not allowing myself to be drawn into emotional arguments or negotiations. Alex was skilled at making me doubt my own perceptions, at reframing situations so that I ended up apologizing for bringing up concerns. But documented evidence doesn't apologize, and clear boundaries don't negotiate. I spent Sunday afternoon exploring the lodge's hiking trails, breathing mountain air, and thinking about the life I wanted to build after this confrontation. For 6 years, my identity had been wrapped up in being Alex's wife, in trying to earn acceptance from his family, in modifying myself to fit into their expectations. Walking alone through old-growth forests with my phone documenting beautiful scenery instead of evidence of betrayal, I remembered who I'd been before I'd started contorting myself to fit into the Ellis family structure. I'd been confident, independent, successful in my career without needing anyone's validation. I'd had friends who enjoyed my company without requiring me to bring appropriate hostess gifts or follow unspoken social protocols. I'd made decisions based on what felt right for me, not based on what would least inconvenience other people. That person was still there, underneath 6 years of systematic diminishment. She was angry about what had been done to her, but she was also excited about reclaiming her life. Sunday evening, I had dinner alone in the lodge's fine dining restaurant, wearing my best dress and jewelry. Other guests probably assumed I was waiting for someone or that I'd been stood up, but I felt completely comfortable dining solo. The food was excellent, the wine was perfect, and for 2 hours I had engaging conversation with my server about the local wine region without once worrying about whether I was saying the right things or making the right impression. After dinner, I sat in the lodge's library with a glass of port, writing in the journal I'd brought. Not about Alex or his betrayal, but about my goals for the next year. Professional projects I wanted to pursue, places I wanted to travel, relationships I wanted to rebuild that had been neglected during my years of Ellis family management. By the time I went to bed Sunday night, I had a comprehensive plan for confronting Alex and a clear vision for my life afterward. More importantly, I had recovered the sense of my own worth that had been systematically eroded by months of being treated as inconvenient. Monday morning, I extended my checkout by 1 day. I wasn't ready to return to Seattle, to the house where I'd been lied to, until I absolutely had to. Instead, I worked remotely from the lodge, handling client emails and project management from my suite overlooking Mount Hood. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was more productive working from a luxury resort than I'd been in weeks at my regular office, because I wasn't spending mental energy managing Alex's moods or anticipating his needs or worrying about whether I was being sufficiently supportive of his fictional family crises. I also spent Monday afternoon taking photos of myself around the lodge, hiking the trails, enjoying spa treatments, having breakfast on my private balcony with Mount Hood in the background. These weren't revenge photos or attempts to make anyone jealous. They were documentation of my own joy, evidence that I could create beautiful experiences for myself without anyone's permission or participation. By Monday evening, I had everything I needed for Tuesday's confrontation: legal counsel scheduled, living arrangements secured, evidence organized, and most importantly, complete clarity about what I wanted to happen next. I wasn't going into this confrontation hoping to save my marriage or win Alex back. I was going into it to reclaim my dignity and inform him that the version of me who accepted lies as love no longer existed. The woman who would meet Alex at our house Tuesday evening was fundamentally different from the woman who had helped him pack for his fictional hospital vigil 4 days earlier. She was done being managed, manipulated, and erased. She was ready to demand truth, respect, and accountability. And she was completely prepared to walk away from anyone who couldn't provide those basic requirements for a healthy relationship. Tuesday evening arrived with unusual clarity. I sat in my car in our driveway at 6:30 p.m., watching Alex's silver sedan pull up behind me. He looked tired as he got out, carrying the same weekend bag he'd packed 4 days earlier for his fictional hospital vigil. His shoulders were slightly slumped, like someone transitioning back into a less comfortable version of himself. I recognized that posture now. It was the same exhausted demeanor he'd carried after every Ellis family event I'd been excluded from. Not tired from stress or medical emergencies, but tired from having to return to pretending to be someone he wasn't. I waited until he'd unloaded his bag and started walking toward our front door. He turned at the sound of my car door closing, and I watched his face register surprise of seeing me arrive home at the same time he was returning from his supposed family crisis. "Olivia, I thought you'd be inside. Where were you?" "I had some errands to run." I kept my voice neutral, professional. "How's Jessica doing?" "She's stable, thank God. Still in the hospital, but the doctors are optimistic about her recovery." The lie rolled off his tongue so smoothly that I almost admired the skill it required. It's been an exhausting few days for everyone. "I'm sure it has been." We walked into our house together, and I noticed how he immediately began the subtle process of reintegrating himself into our shared space. dropping his keys in the bowl by the door, hanging his jacket in the closet, moving through the familiar routine of returning home. But there was something different in his movements tonight, a wariness, like he was sensing that something had shifted in his absence, but couldn't quite identify what. "You seem different," he said, watching me as I set my purse on the kitchen counter. "Everything okay?" "Everything's fine. I had a very productive weekend." I opened our laptop on the dining room table and gestured for him to sit across from me. "Actually, I'd like to show you what I've been working on." Alex sat down, his expression cautious but not yet alarmed. He probably assumed I wanted to show him the Henderson Industries presentation I'd been preparing, or some other work project that had occupied my time while he dealt with his family emergency. "I put together a comprehensive timeline of your family events over the past 8 months," I began, opening the presentation I'd created at Skamania Lodge. I thought it might be helpful for us to review it together. The first slide appeared on screen. Ellis Family Celebrations, Stated versus Actual Events, January to November. I watched Alex's face carefully as he read the title. The color drained slowly from his cheeks, but he maintained his composure with impressive control. "Olivia, what is this?" "It's documentation." I clicked to the next slide, which showed the timeline of exclusions with corresponding social media evidence. "Let's start with Malcolm's birthday dinner in September. You told me it was immediate family only, too small to include spouses." The slide displayed his exact quote alongside screenshots of Demi's Facebook photos showing 12 couples in formal attire at an elegant restaurant celebration. Then there was the retirement luncheon in July. I clicked again. "Boring business talk," you said. "No spouses invited." Photos of the country club event with multiple couples celebrating filled the screen. Alex was staring at the laptop screen, his hands gripping the edge of our dining table. "Where did you get these photos?" "Social media. It's remarkable how much family celebration happens online these days." I clicked through more slides methodically. "Easter dinner, your cousin's graduation party, your grandmother's birthday. Each event you told me was canceled, postponed, or too small for me to attend." With each slide, Alex seemed to shrink further into his chair. The confident man who'd returned home from his sister's wedding was being replaced by someone who looked cornered and defensive. "This brings us to this weekend," I continued, reaching the final section of my presentation, Jessica's medical emergency. The slide filled with wedding photos. Alex in his navy blazer giving his best man speech, the entire Ellis family celebrating at Timberline Lodge, Jessica herself posting selfies from the reception while supposedly in intensive care. "Would you like to explain any of this, Alex?" The silence stretched between us for nearly a minute. I could see him calculating, trying to determine if there was any explanation that might salvage the situation, any way to reframe the evidence I'd presented. Finally, he looked up from the laptop screen and met my eyes directly for the first time since I'd started the presentation. "How long have you known?" "Since Saturday afternoon. I discovered Owen's wedding posts while you were supposedly at the hospital with your dying aunt." "Olivia, I can explain." "No," I closed the laptop calmly. "You can't explain this. You can't explain 6 months of systematic lies. You can't explain using a fictional medical emergency to cover attending your sister's wedding. You can't exclude me from family celebrations while I helped plan them." I stood up from the dining table, feeling remarkably calm despite the magnitude of what was happening. "What you can do is listen while I tell you what happens next." Alex remained seated, looking up at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not the confident husband who managed my expectations and emotions, not the skilled liar who crafted elaborate deceptions, just a man who'd been caught and was beginning to understand that the consequences were going to be more severe than he'd anticipated. "I've already consulted with the divorce attorney. I'm staying at my sister's house starting tonight, and I'm posting some photos from my own weekend getaway." I pulled out my phone and showed him the images I'd taken at Skamania Lodge. Me hiking mountain trails, enjoying spa treatments, having breakfast with Mount Hood visible in the background. 40 minutes from Timberline Lodge, Alex. I was that close to your sister's wedding while you told me I wasn't welcome at your family celebrations. For the first time since I'd known him, Alex looked genuinely afraid. "You were at Skamania Lodge?" Alex's voice cracked slightly as he processed what I'd shown him. "During Chloe's wedding?" While you were pretending Jessica was dying in a hospital. Yes. I was 40 minutes away enjoying a luxury spa weekend and documenting my own celebration of independence. I slipped my phone back into my purse. It's remarkable how peaceful it is to be somewhere you're actually welcome. Alex stood up abruptly from the dining table, running his hands through his hair in that familiar gesture of stress. But this time, instead of feeling sympathy for his discomfort, I felt nothing but cold satisfaction at watching him finally face consequences for his actions. Olivia, you have to understand, it's not what you think. Stop. I held up my hand. I'm not interested in explanations or excuses or whatever story you're about to craft to make this my fault somehow. I've heard enough of your lies to last a lifetime. They're not lies exactly. The situations were just more complicated then. Jessica posted selfies from the wedding reception, Alex, while you were texting me about intensive care units and her critical condition. She was taking photos at the party and posting them on Instagram with timestamps. His face went pale. You saw Jessica's posts? I saw everyone's posts. Your mother's behind-the-scenes wedding preparation photos, your father's proud family portraits, Tony's groomsmen pictures with you prominently featured, your own best man speech captured on video by multiple guests. I moved toward our bedroom to get the overnight bag I'd packed earlier. I saw it all, Alex. Every moment of the celebration you deliberately excluded me from while lying to my face about where you were. He followed me down the hallway, his voice taking on the pleading tone I'd heard so many times before when he was trying to manage my emotions and expectations. The wedding planning got complicated. Mom had strong opinions about the guest list, and there were budget constraints, and Chloe was stressed about numbers. I helped plan that wedding. I pulled my bag from the closet and set it on our bed. I researched venues for months. I recommended the florist, the photographer, the caterers. I spent hours of my professional time helping your family create their perfect celebration. I know, and they appreciated that. But they used me for free consulting services, then excluded me from the event I'd helped create. I checked to make sure I had everything I needed for several days away from the house. And you orchestrated the entire deception. Alex sat heavily on the edge of our bed, watching me pack. For a moment, his defensive posture cracked, and I saw something that looked like genuine remorse. I never meant for it to go this far. At first, it was just easier to avoid the conflict with Mom about the guest list. Then, when you started asking questions about save the dates and dress shopping, I thought I could handle it gradually, maybe find a way to include you at the last minute. But you didn't find a way to include me. Instead, you created an elaborate fictional medical emergency to cover your attendance at the wedding I'd helped plan. The Jessica thing was a panic decision. Mom called Wednesday night in a complete meltdown because Chloe was having anxiety about the weather forecast and the catering timeline, and I realized I needed to be there Thursday morning for the rehearsal activities. I couldn't think of any other explanation that wouldn't raise questions. I stopped packing and looked at him directly. So you lied to me about your aunt being hospitalized rather than simply telling me the truth about your sister's wedding? I was protecting you from my mother's opinions. You know how she can be about guest lists and social dynamics. I know how she is when I'm around, Alex, but I didn't know until this weekend that you'd been systematically facilitating my exclusion from family events for months. That's not what I was doing. Then what would you call it? I zipped my bag closed and turned to face him fully. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been managing me like an inconvenient problem that needs to be contained, rather than treating me like your wife who deserves basic honesty and inclusion. Alex was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. When he finally looked up, there was something different in his expression. Less defense, more resignation. You're right. That's exactly what I was doing. His voice was barely above a whisper. I was managing you instead of defending you. I was choosing the path of least resistance with my family instead of fighting for my wife. Why? The question came out more vulnerable than I'd intended, but I needed to understand. Why was it easier to lie to me than to stand up to your mother about a guest list?
Because fighting with Mom is exhausting and complicated and creates drama that affects everyone. But lying to you. He paused, seeming to realize what he was about to admit. Lying to you was easy because you trusted me completely. You believed whatever I told you and never demanded proof or pushed back or made things difficult. The honesty was devastating, precisely because it was finally true. So you chose to betray the person who trusted you most because it was more convenient than having difficult conversations with people who would have fought back. Alex nodded slowly. That's exactly what I did, and I see now how cruel that was, even though it never felt cruel in the moment. I picked up my bag and walked toward our bedroom door. It was cruel, Alex, and it was calculated, and it's over. Where are you going? To my sister's house. My attorney will contact you about separation arrangements. Olivia, wait, can't we try to work through this? Can't we go to counseling or something? I turned back to look at him one final time. You spent 6 months systematically excluding me from your family while lying to me about it. You used a fictional medical emergency to cover attending your sister's wedding. You treated me like an inconvenient problem to be managed rather than a person whose feelings mattered. I paused at the bedroom doorway. What exactly do you think we should work through? How to help you lie to me more effectively? How to make me more accepting of being treated like I don't exist? Alex had no answer for that. I'm done being married to someone who thinks I'm too much trouble to include in his real life, Alex. I'm done being managed and manipulated and lied to by the person who's supposed to love me most. I do love you. No, you don't. You love how easy I was to control. But you never loved me enough to choose me over your family's comfort, and that's not enough for me anymore. I walked out of our bedroom and headed toward the front door, but Alex followed me, his voice growing more desperate with each step. Olivia, please don't leave like this. We can fix this. I know I screwed up, but we can work through it. I stopped at our front door and turned to face him one last time. Alex, I need you to understand something. This isn't about one wedding or one lie. This is about discovering that my entire marriage has been built on systematic deception. That's not true. It is true. I pulled out my phone and opened the folder of screenshots I'd compiled. Do you want to see the restaurant delivery I arranged for your family's hospital vigil? The one that was rejected because there was no Ellis family at Portland General Hospital. His face went ashen. Do you want to see the care package I assembled for your supposedly exhausting medical crisis? The chicken soup I made for a man who was eating wedding cake instead. Olivia, I spent Saturday morning handling your errands and watering your office plants so you could focus entirely on your family's needs. While you were getting fitted for your tuxedo and rehearsing your best man speech, I showed him the photos I'd taken of the care package, the homemade soup, the organized briefcase I'd prepared, in case he needed work documents overnighted to Portland. Every gesture of love and support I offered was based on a lie you told me. Every sacrifice I made was for a situation that didn't exist. Every moment I spent being the perfect supportive wife was enabling your betrayal of our marriage. Alex sank into the chair by our front door, his head in his hands. I never meant for it to hurt you this much. You never meant for me to find out at all. I opened the door, then paused. There's something else you should know before I leave. He looked up hopefully, as if I might offer some path toward reconciliation. I called Jessica on Sunday. The color drained completely from his face. You called Jessica. I wanted to send flowers to her hospital room. Imagine my surprise when she answered her home phone, completely healthy, and started telling me all about the beautiful wedding she'd attended the night before. Oh God, she was confused about why I thought she'd been hospitalized. She asked if I'd gotten my wires crossed about which family member had medical issues. Then she realized what had happened. I adjusted my bag on my shoulder. She was horrified, Alex. Genuinely horrified that her name had been used to cover your deception. What did you tell her? I told her the truth. That you'd used a fictional emergency involving her to explain why you couldn't be home with your wife during your sister's wedding weekend. I opened our front door wider. She offered to call you immediately to straighten things out. I told her not to bother, that I was handling the situation myself. Alex looked like he might be sick. She's going to tell the whole family. I imagine she will. The question is what story they'll tell themselves about why their son and brother felt the need to create such an elaborate deception, rather than simply including his wife in family celebrations. They'll blame me entirely. Mom will say she never explicitly told me not to invite you. And will that be true? Alex was quiet for a long moment. No. Mom made it very clear from the beginning that she preferred family-only celebrations for major events. She said, including extended family and spouses would change the dynamic and make things too complicated. Extended family and spouses, that's how your mother categorizes me after 6 years of marriage. She doesn't understand our relationship. She thinks we're too different, that you don't really fit with our family's style. And what do you think, Alex? He looked up at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Complete defeat mixed with something that might have been clarity. I think I spent so much energy trying to keep everyone happy that I forgot to consider whether what I was doing was right. I got so focused on avoiding conflict that I lost sight of who was getting hurt by my choices. And who was getting hurt by your choices? You, always you. Because you were the one person I knew would forgive me, would make excuses for me, would accept whatever explanation I offered without demanding more. I nodded. That's exactly right. You weaponized my love against me. I didn't think of it that way, but yes, that's what I did. And now Jessica knows. And soon your whole family will know that you created a fictional medical emergency, rather than tell your wife the truth about not being invited to your sister's wedding. Alex buried his face in his hands again. They're going to think I'm a coward. You are a coward, Alex. You're a coward who chose systematic deception over honest conversation. You're a coward who excluded his wife from family celebrations rather than have difficult conversations with his mother. You're a coward who lied about medical emergencies rather than admit to your spouse that she wasn't welcome at important family events. I stepped outside, then turned back one final time. But here's the thing about being a coward, Alex. It only works when the other person is too afraid to demand better. And I'm not that person anymore. What does that mean? It means I'm done protecting you from the consequences of your choices. I'm done making excuses for your family's behavior toward me. I'm done accepting lies as love and exclusion as normal family dynamics. I walked toward my car, then called back over my shoulder. Your family is going to find out exactly what kind of man you are, Alex. Not from me. I'm not going to dignify this situation by engaging in family drama. They're going to find out from Jessica, who's horrified that her name was used to cover your deception. They're going to find out from the social media posts that documented your sister's wedding while you claimed to be at a hospital. They're going to find out because lies this elaborate always eventually collapse under their own weight. I got in my car and started the engine, rolling down the window for one final comment. The only difference is that this time, I won't be there to help you clean up the mess you've made. This time, you get to face the consequences of your choices without me running interference, or making excuses or helping you craft better lies. Olivia, please, goodbye, Alex. My attorney will be in touch about the divorce proceedings. As I drove away from the house we'd shared for 6 years, I could see Alex standing in our doorway in my rearview mirror, looking smaller and more defeated than I'd ever seen him. But for the first time in our entire relationship, his emotional state wasn't my problem to manage. And that felt like freedom. That evening at my sister Astor's house, I sat at her kitchen table with a glass of wine and my laptop, crafting a single Instagram post that would change everything. Not a long explanation or a detailed accusation, just a simple statement of truth with a photo that spoke volumes. I selected the image I'd taken on my private balcony at Skamania Lodge. Me in elegant pajamas, holding a champagne flute, with Mount Hood perfectly framed in the background through floor-to-ceiling windows. The luxury suite was obvious, the mountain location unmistakable, the timestamp clearly showing Saturday evening during Chloe's wedding. For the caption I wrote, "Sometimes the most beautiful celebrations happen when you choose yourself." Skamania Lodge this weekend, 40 minutes from Timberline, but a world away from family drama. Here's to mountain air, spa treatments, and the clarity that comes from being somewhere you're genuinely welcome.
I added location tags for both Skamania Lodge and Mount Hood, making the proximity to the wedding venue impossible to miss. Then I included hashtags that told the story without saying it directly. Hashtag self-care, hashtag Mount Hood, hashtag Skamania Lodge, hashtag choosing me, hashtag weekend retreat, hashtag clarity, hashtag something's better, hashtag new chapter. I posted it at 9 p.m. Tuesday night, exactly 3 hours after leaving Alex standing in our doorway. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within minutes, friends and colleagues were commenting with fire emojis and messages of support. People who knew me well understood exactly what this post meant, even without explicit details. My college roommate commented, "Queen energy, about time." My coworker Jessica wrote, "That glow though, mountain air suits you." My neighbor added, "Sometimes the best company is your own. You look radiant." But it was the direct messages that told me the post had achieved its intended impact. Screenshots started arriving from mutual acquaintances showing Ellis family members frantically commenting on each other's social media posts, trying to understand what had happened and control the narrative. Demi Ellis had commented on Chloe's wedding photos, "Can we please take this conversation private? Family matters should be handled within the family." Malcolm had posted a cryptic message on Facebook, "Some people prefer to handle disagreements publicly rather than through mature conversation." But it was Chloe's response that surprised me most. She sent me a direct message at 10:30 p.m. "Olivia, I had no idea Alex told you Jessica was sick. I thought you chose not to come. Can we talk?" I screenshotted her message and showed it to Aster, who was reading over my shoulder as notifications continued pouring in. "She's trying to distance herself from the deception," Aster observed, making it sound like this was all Alex's doing and she was an innocent victim of his lies. Except she knew I wasn't invited. She knew Alex was creating elaborate explanations for my absence from family events. She chose not to question why her brother's wife, who helped plan her wedding, wasn't included in the celebration. "Are you going to respond to her?" I thought about it for a moment, then typed back, "Chloe, I helped you research venues, find vendors, and plan details for months. If you genuinely believed I chose not to attend the wedding I helped create, you never once reached out to ask why or express disappointment about my absence. That tells me everything I need to know about how much my presence actually mattered to you." I sent the message, then turned my phone face down on the table. I'm done explaining myself to people who enabled my exclusion. If they want to pretend they're innocent bystanders who had no idea what Alex was doing, they can have that conversation with each other. Aster refilled my wine glass. "How do you feel?" "Powerful," I said, surprising myself with how true that was. For the first time in 6 years, I'm not trying to manage anyone else's emotions or make excuses for anyone else's behavior. I'm not trying to prove I deserve to be included or accepted. I'm just stating my truth and letting them deal with the consequences. My phone buzzed with another message. This time it was from Jessica Ellis, Alex's aunt. "Dear Olivia, I am so deeply sorry my name was used to deceive you. I had no knowledge of what Alex was doing, and I'm horrified that he involved me in such a cruel lie. I've spoken to the family about this situation and want you to know that not everyone supported the decision to exclude you from family celebrations. I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive an old woman who should have spoken up sooner when she noticed you were absent from so many gatherings." I showed the message to Aster, who whistled softly. She's taking responsibility and calling out the rest of the family. That's significant. It is, and it confirms what I suspected, that my exclusion was a known, discussed decision, not some accidental oversight or series of unfortunate circumstances. I replied to Jessica, "Thank you for your honesty and your apology. I appreciate that you're taking responsibility for your role in this situation. I don't hold you responsible for Alex's decision to use your name in his deception. That was his choice alone. I hope you recover quickly from having your reputation associated with such an elaborate lie." The beauty of my Instagram post was its restraint. I hadn't accused anyone directly, hadn't shared screenshots of the wedding evidence, hadn't written a detailed exposé of Alex's deception.
I'd simply documented my own joy and made it clear that I'd been 40 minutes from the family celebration while supposedly being excluded due to circumstances beyond anyone's control.
Anyone who saw the post and knew about the wedding timeline would understand exactly what had happened, but I hadn't stooped to public accusations or family drama. I'd maintained my dignity while making the truth impossible to ignore. By 11 p.m., my phone showed over 200 likes and dozens of supportive comments. But more importantly, I could see from the activity that the Ellis family was scrambling to understand and contain a situation that had spiraled far beyond their control. For 6 years, they'd managed to exclude me from their celebrations while maintaining plausible deniability about their motives. They'd crafted elaborate explanations and relied on my willingness to accept whatever story Alex provided. But now, their systematic exclusion was visible to mutual friends, colleagues, and social connections. Their carefully maintained facade of family harmony was cracking under the weight of undeniable evidence. And for the first time in our relationship, I wasn't helping Alex or his family clean up the mess they'd created. I wasn't running interference, making excuses, or trying to smooth things over. I was simply living my truth publicly and letting them face the consequences of their choices without my assistance. It felt revolutionary. Wednesday morning brought a flood of consequences that cascaded through Alex's professional and personal life with remarkable speed. I was having coffee at Astor's kitchen table when my phone started buzzing with forwarded messages and screenshots from mutual friends who were watching the Ellis family drama unfold in real time. The first major fallout came from Alex's workplace. Apparently, Malcolm Ellis had called Alex's boss Tuesday night in a panic, trying to explain why his son had used a fictional medical emergency to miss work, only to have photographic evidence surface showing him at a luxury wedding celebration instead. My former colleague Jennifer, who worked at the same consulting firm as Alex, sent me a screenshot of the company's internal message board where employees were discussing the situation. The post read, "When you lie about a family medical emergency to get time off work, but forget that social media exists and your whole family posts wedding photos with timestamps." Alex had been placed on administrative leave pending an investigation into fraudulent use of emergency leave policies. The second wave of consequences hit his consulting clients. 3 separate business owners had called the firm Wednesday morning to request different account managers, citing concerns about Alex's judgment and reliability after the wedding deception story had spread through their professional networks. But the most devastating professional consequence came from an unexpected source. Henderson Industries, the major client I'd been preparing to pitch to, had reached out to my agency Wednesday afternoon requesting a meeting about their marketing campaign. When my boss asked how they'd learned about our firm, they mentioned seeing my Instagram post and being impressed by my authentic personal brand and professional discretion during difficult circumstances. The same weekend that cost Alex his credibility had inadvertently showcased mine. The Ellis family consequences were equally swift and public. Jessica Ellis had apparently taken her horror about the medical emergency deception seriously, calling each family member individually to express her outrage about having her name used to cover Alex's lies. By Wednesday evening, Astor showed me a Facebook post from Alex's grandmother that made the family's position devastatingly clear. Sometimes you don't know someone as well as you think you do. Disappointed doesn't begin to cover how I feel about dishonesty within our family, especially dishonesty that hurts someone who has always been nothing but kind and supportive. Demi Ellis had tried to control the narrative by posting a carefully worded message about family misunderstandings and the importance of private conversations, but the comments section had filled with questions about why Alex's wife wasn't at his sister's wedding and what kind of misunderstanding required fictional medical emergencies. Malcolm had deleted his Facebook account entirely rather than continue fielding questions about his son's deception. Most significantly, Chloe had posted her own statement Wednesday afternoon. "I want to publicly apologize to my sister-in-law Olivia for the hurt and exclusion she experienced around my wedding. I was so focused on my own celebration that I failed to question why someone who had helped me plan my special day wasn't included in it. I should have asked harder questions and insisted on including her. I'm sorry for my part in a situation that caused real pain to someone who had shown me nothing but kindness and support."
It was more accountability than I'd expected from any Ellis family member, and it effectively made Alex's position within his own family untenable. But the consequence that satisfied me most came Thursday morning when I received a call from my attorney with unexpected news. "Olivia, I've received a very interesting call from Alex's attorney," she said. "Apparently, your husband is interested in expediting the divorce proceedings and making the property settlement as straightforward as possible." "What does that mean exactly?" "It means he wants to avoid a lengthy legal process that would involve detailed documentation of marital assets and potentially require testimony about the circumstances leading to the separation." She paused. "Between you and me, I think the professional consequences he's facing have made him realize that a prolonged divorce battle would generate even more negative attention he can't afford. So he's willing to be generous with the settlement to make this go away quickly. Very generous. He's proposing that you keep the house, the car, and your personal assets, while he takes responsibility for his own business debts and professional obligations. He's also willing to waive spousal support claims in exchange for a quick, clean separation." I was quiet for a moment, processing this information. He's paying for a clean exit because he can't afford any more public scrutiny of his character. That would be my assessment of his motivation, yes. Within a week of my Instagram post, Alex had lost his job, his clients, his family's respect, and was desperately trying to minimize further damage by agreeing to divorce terms that heavily favored me. The man who had spent 6 years systematically excluding me from his family while lying to my face was now willing to give me everything I wanted just to escape the consequences of his deception as quickly as possible. Friday afternoon, I signed the preliminary separation agreement from the comfort of Astor's living room, legally ending my marriage to someone who had treated me like an inconvenience to be managed rather than a person whose feelings mattered. The final irony wasn't lost on me. Alex had spent months crafting elaborate lies to avoid difficult conversations about including me in family celebrations. But his systematic deception had ultimately cost him far more than simply standing up to his mother about a guest list ever would have. If he'd simply told Demi Ellis that his wife would be attending family events regardless of her preferences, the worst consequence would have been some family tension and uncomfortable holiday dinners. Instead, his elaborate web of lies had cost him his marriage, his career, his family relationships, and his reputation within our entire social and professional network. The man who'd thought lying to me was easier than disappointing his mother had discovered that some lies are too expensive to maintain. And for the first time in our relationship, I wasn't there to help him figure out how to fix the mess he'd created. This time, Alex was facing the consequences of his choices entirely alone. Just like I'd been facing the consequences of his lies for months without realizing it. 3 weeks after my Instagram post, I received a call that revealed just how deep the Ellis family's deception had actually run. It came from an unexpected source, Tony Morgan, Chloe's new husband. "Olivia, I hope you don't mind me reaching out directly," he said, his voice careful and formal. "I've been wanting to talk to you since the wedding, but I wasn't sure how to approach the situation." "What's on your mind, Tony?" "I need to tell you something about the guest list decisions that I don't think you know. Something that makes Alex's lies even worse than you realize." I sat down at Astor's kitchen table, sensing that whatever Tony was about to tell me would be significant. "Chloe and I actually argued about inviting you to the wedding. Multiple times. She wanted to include you because you'd helped so much with the planning, but every time she brought it up with her mother, Demi would shut it down immediately." My stomach tightened. What exactly did Demi say? She said that family weddings were for family only, and that including extended family members and their spouses would change the entire dynamic of the celebration. But then she'd turn around and invite her sorority sisters from college, Malcolm's golf buddies, and neighbors they barely talked to. So it wasn't about keeping the wedding small or intimate, not at all. The final guest count was 180 people. But every time your name came up, Demi would get this expression and say something like, "Well, we certainly don't need to complicate things with people who don't understand our family traditions." I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar sting of exclusion, but now with the added pain of knowing it had been so deliberate and personal. Tony, why are you telling me this now? Because what Alex did, lying about Jessica being hospitalized, that was his choice and his responsibility. But the reason he felt like he needed to lie in the first place was because our family systematically excluded you and then expected him to manage your feelings about it. And what do you think about that? I think it was cruel and cowardly. And I think you deserve to know the truth about why you weren't welcome at family celebrations, rather than being fed a series of elaborate lies about venue restrictions and guest count limitations. Tony's call was followed by an even more revealing conversation with Alex's cousin Marcus, who reached out through Facebook Messenger the following day. "I owe you an apology," Marcus wrote. "I've been watching this whole situation unfold, and I realized I need to tell you about something that happened at Easter dinner this year." He explained that during the family gathering I'd been excluded from, Demi had made a comment about how much more relaxed and authentic family celebrations were without outside influences, who didn't understand their family dynamic. "When I asked what she meant," Marcus continued, "she specifically mentioned you. She said she felt like she had to be own when you were around, like she couldn't just be herself with her own family. She said having you at gatherings made her feel judged for their family traditions and conversation style." The message continued. "Alex was sitting right there when she said this. He didn't defend you or push back. He just nodded and said something about how different your family backgrounds were. I should have said something, but I didn't want to during what I thought was a family medical emergency, and the entire time they were all getting ready for a wedding. A wedding I had helped plan but wasn't invited to attend. 6 months after walking out of the house I'd shared with Alex, I stood in the doorway of my new downtown apartment, looking out at the Seattle skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows that belonged entirely to me. The space was smaller than the Craftsman house we'd renovated together, but every square inch reflected my actual preferences, rather than careful compromises designed to accommodate someone else's family dynamics. The divorce had been finalized 3 weeks earlier with remarkable speed and efficiency. True to his word, Alex had agreed to terms that heavily favored me, desperate to minimize any further public scrutiny of the circumstances surrounding our separation. I kept the house, which I immediately sold, using the proceeds to buy this apartment and establish a substantial emergency fund that would ensure I'd never again be financially dependent on someone who treated me like an inconvenience. The professional consequences of Alex's deception had been even more severe than either of us had anticipated. Not only had he lost his position at the consulting firm, but word of the wedding lies had spread throughout Seattle's tight-knit business community. 3 months after being placed on administrative leave, he'd been forced to relocate to Portland to find work, taking a position with significantly less responsibility and a salary reduction of nearly 40%. Meanwhile, the Henderson Industries contract I'd won in the aftermath of his lies had led to 2 additional major clients who specifically requested to work with me after hearing about my professional grace under personal pressure. My agency had promoted me to senior partner and increased my salary by fair. The irony wasn't lost on me that Alex's systematic deception designed to exclude me from his family life had ultimately elevated my professional reputation while destroying his own. But the most significant changes in my life weren't financial or professional, they were personal. Living alone in a space designed entirely around my preferences had reminded me of who I'd been before I'd started contorting myself to fit into Ellis family expectations. I'd reconnected with college friends I'd gradually lost touch with during my marriage, relationships that had been deprioritized in favor of Alex's family obligations and social requirements. I'd started taking evening art classes, something I'd abandoned years earlier because Alex thought it was an impractical use of time. I'd begun traveling solo, taking weekend trips to places I found interesting rather than locations that would photograph well for Ellis family's social media. Most importantly, I'd learned to trust my instincts again. Those moments during my marriage when I'd felt excluded or dismissed, I'd been right. The conversations that stopped when I entered rooms, the inside jokes that were never explained, the family photos where I somehow always ended up positioned at the edges, none of it had been my imagination or oversensitivity. I'd been systematically marginalized by people who then convinced me that my perception of that marginalization was the real problem. The revelation that stung most hadn't been Alex's lies or his family's cruelty. It had been discovering how thoroughly I'd abandoned my own judgment in favor of maintaining a relationship that was slowly erasing me. But sitting in my new apartment on a Sunday morning in May, 6 months after discovering the wedding deception, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: complete peace with my own company. I wasn't lonely. I wasn't desperate to fill the silence with someone else's voice or presence. I wasn't scanning social media for evidence that other people were living better lives than mine. I was simply content to be exactly where I was, exactly as I was, without needing anyone else's validation or approval. The Ellis family had tried to reach out several times in the months following the divorce. Jessica had sent a heartfelt letter apologizing again for her role in enabling my exclusion and inviting me to lunch whenever I felt ready. Chloe had called twice, wanting to rebuild our relationship and asking if I'd be willing to help plan her first anniversary celebration. I'd responded politely but firmly to all overtures. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger required too much energy and emotional investment in people who had already taken enough of both from me. But I also wasn't interested in rebuilding relationships with people who had demonstrated that my inclusion in their lives was conditional on my willingness to accept whatever treatment they chose to offer. The woman who had spent years trying to earn her place in the Ellis family was gone. In her place was someone who understood that belonging somewhere that required you to disappear wasn't belonging at all. It was elaborate, consensual erasure. As for Alex, I'd heard through mutual acquaintances that he'd been trying to rebuild his reputation in Portland. Telling people that our marriage had ended due to irreconcilable differences about family priorities, rather than acknowledging the systematic deception that had actually destroyed our relationship. I felt nothing about his revisionist history except mild amusement. Let him craft whatever narrative helped him sleep at night. The people who mattered knew the truth, and the people who didn't matter wouldn't affect my life either way. The most surprising aspect of my post-divorce life had been discovering that the qualities that made me difficult for the Ellis family, my directness, my unwillingness to accept vague explanations, my expectation that people treat me with basic honesty and respect, were exactly the qualities that made me successful in my career and attractive to genuinely healthy relationships. I'd started dating someone new 2 months earlier, a man who introduced me to his family at our third dinner together, and included me in group texts about casual weekend plans without being asked. When I'd mentioned my surprise at being included so naturally in his social life, he'd looked genuinely confused. "Why wouldn't I include you? You're important to me." It was such a simple concept, but after 6 years with Alex it felt revolutionary. Looking back, I realized that Alex's lies about the wedding had been a gift disguised as a betrayal. Without the dramatic revelation of his deception, I might have spent years more accepting gradual exclusion as normal, making excuses for treatment that slowly convinced me I was asking for too much by expecting basic honesty and inclusion. The fictional medical emergency that had been designed to exclude me from one celebration had ultimately freed me from a marriage where I was systematically excluded from a life that was supposed to include me. 6 months later, I was building a life that was entirely my own, authentic, honest, and filled with people who celebrated rather than merely tolerated my presence. And for the first time in years, that felt like more than enough. It felt like everything.
Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.